Hello, everybody. Linda here, and looking forward to chatting with Fiona today about. Hey, Ashley. Hi, Katie. Hey, Fiona. Can you just ask to join, Fee, and I will say yes, and we will be able to chat. Hey, Liz. Good to see you online. I know today's going to be a great conversation. Fiona's all amazing things to say, a fantastic perspective. So just while we're waiting for Fiona to join in, a reminder to those of you who have, hey, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm good, I'm good.
Try and get this height better.
Yeah, we're looking at the crown of your head right now. There we go. Let's see your big face. Well, we've got a few people online, which is awesome. We only need two, you and me, but it's always good to get a few more, including some friends and family. So for those of you who are joining us for the first time, we have been doing a series of interviews with people, the women behind the stories of the She Is Project. So you've read the words, now you get to meet the people. And for those of you who've been part of the She Is community for a while, you'll probably recognise Fiona's face, and you will definitely recognise her words as she begins to speak, because she has been here from the very beginning.
That's right.
Before the She Is Project even was a project, there was a random conversation between Fiona and I in Wollongong Mall.
Yes.
And that's how it began, really. I had a thought, I shared that thought, and Fiona said, I'll help you with that. And next thing you know, we had a website, and here we are 5 years later. So thanks, Fee, publicly acknowledging your awesomeness.
That's okay.
But Fiona's contributed a few stories, as well as her creative digital wizardry behind the scenes, shared a few stories over the last couple of years. And I know that she has a depth of insight and wisdom that the world needs to hear about. And so I thought, what a great opportunity for you to share a little bit about your personal story, or a part of your story, and particularly focusing around one of the stories that's in this latest volume of the She Is Project, Product Placement, Wisdom and Wonder. Your coffee table needs one if you don't have it already. But Fiona, for those of you who don't know you, or maybe haven't met you before, can you just give us the quick bio, what you're up to now, where you're situated, what you like to do?
Okay. So I live in Wollongong as well. Who doesn't? And yeah, so my husband Dave and I run a videography business together. So we kind of fill our life up running around filming lots of random things, which is really interesting. Life's always different. And yeah, I try to keep my life pretty simple these days.
What's your business called? This is your big chance to our audience of 8 to 15 people.
My what, sorry?
What's your business name?
Oh, my business. It's called Pipe Wolf Media.
There you go.
That's right.
For all your videography needs.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so you're in the video world, but your story that was shared in this latest volume, you shared a couple of amazing pieces actually, but the one that I thought would be probably a great topic to explore with our community is around the area of anxiety and dealing with the diagnosis of anxiety. So can you tell me when that became a feature of your life?
Yeah. So I had anxiety for a long time and I didn't know it. And I was officially, diagnosed in probably late 2017, I think, like not that long ago. But when I look back, I think I was probably struggling with it for about 10 years. So I think I probably had anxiety for about 7 years before I actually figured out that I had it. And one of the main reasons for that is I think we see anxiety as someone having a panic attack. And we kind of have this picture that anxiety is someone who's, you know, they're at work and they're too scared to go inside the building, or we interpret it as being very visible fear sort of response, which isn't exactly how I experienced it. So where in reality, anxiety is much more subtle, and it kind of can come through in different areas of our lives. So a lot of those traditional anxiety pictures I've never really had. I just was really unwell for a long time, and no one could figure out what was wrong with me. And I also, looking back, had a lot of like emotional instability, which was more painted by myself and by the people around me as me just being too sensitive or too highly strung, or too much of whatever. And now I understand, oh no, that was an anxiety response. But at the time I just thought I was a bad person because I couldn't handle life the way that everyone else could. I didn't realize that the way that my body was outworking fear was actually, it just looked different. I'm very high functioning in terms that I can still go to work, but also be experiencing a high level of anxiety. So yeah, I got really unwell. I basically had chronic fatigue. So I'd sleep fine all night, and then I would wake up in the morning and I would have a shower, and then I would be so exhausted after the shower that I would just sit on the bed and just cry. I couldn't do anything else. And then I would somehow get dressed, and then I would cry when I got to the car because I was so tired. And then I would drive to work and then somehow get upstairs to the office, and then I would just sit there and cry until they sent me home. And I just did that for weeks and weeks on end.
So you're in like a state of overwhelm.
Yeah. And I had 24/7 nausea, which was motion sickness related. So I had to basically just lay really still. Yeah, my entire body was just maxed out in every level. And then I would recover from that, and then I would have another episode where I would have different symptoms, but I would have like hot flushes or, you know, insane chest pain. Like you think you're having a heart attack kind of chest pain. And then, basically lots of nausea, lots of really uncomfortable bodily symptoms.
So what was it that prompted you to actually that led to you getting the diagnosis of anxiety? What was there a particular event, or?
It was more just like a really slow crawl to that conclusion. So I kept getting really unwell and no one could figure out what was wrong with me. And then I would just recover and then I would be fine. And then I'd get unwell a few months later. So at first, when I was a baby, my dad had glandular fever after a really stressful period of time. So I suppose I already had that link in my mind of this could be caused by stress.
Right.
But they kept being like, well, you don't have glandular fever. You don't have, a thyroid condition, all these sort of things. But as time went on, I just kept being like, there's nothing wrong with my body. Why am I so sick?
Wow.
And then when I would Google, my symptoms were really, because I have to self-research, my symptoms were really vague. I couldn't find anything. And then I remember just sitting there and I'd be like, I just remember I ended up, thinking, and then I just drew a map of the last 3 years and all of the really stressful episodes in those 3 years. And then I did another map of all of my anxiety, like my health issues. And when I overlaid them, they matched perfectly. Okay. And then I was like, okay, I think this is, so I kind of just was like, I think this is something to do with anxiety. And I don't really know anything about anxiety, but I just like booked a doctor's appointment and went in with my 2 little maps, and I put them down and I just said, I have anxiety, help me.
And what was that like to finally be able to put a diagnosis or it's not even, it's more than a label, to actually put some infrastructure around what has been such a pervasive and destructive season of life? What was it like when you finally had a professional say yes?
When well, so the first thing they do is they whip out a little quiz for you to do, which is like a mental health assessment. I love quizzes, especially when they're about me, so I was more than happy to fill that in. And she said I had extreme severe anxiety. I was literally off the Richter. And that was an incredibly, sorry, I'm gonna cry. It was just such a healing moment, because I'd been a problem for so long, and I'd been the person that couldn't get it done.
Yeah.
And I'd been in work situations where I'd been given no compassion. I'd just basically been treated like I wasn't working hard enough. And so to hear like, no, I've been struggling alone on something that's really hard, and most people would have been medicated at that point. It made me just think, I'm going to be okay. Yeah. Because I knew how I'd been through a lot of mental health stuff before. So I knew that once I knew that I had what fight I was in, I could fight it. But I just remember, I love my GP. She's like, I will never stop going to her. She's the best. But, that moment of her just affirming, like, you're not a bad person. You're just, really unwell, was amazing. So, yeah, it was a huge turning point, and it kind of gave me, like, it was the start of a very difficult journey, but it was the end of a very difficult journey as well.
Wow. So
it meant a lot, because it was just like, I wasn't looking anymore. I could start fighting instead of just problem solving. And, so it was amazing, really.
Yeah, that's what an incredibly harrowing experience, and to feel so misunderstood and alone and overwhelmed for such a long time. Your journey highlights how important it is that we find the right professionals to come alongside.
Yeah. And well, actually, at the beginning of that journey, I was going to a different GP, because I used to just go down to the medical center and just, because it was cheap.
Yeah.
And so at the beginning of those 3 years, and that was when I was like, you aren't hearing me. You're not helping me. I need somebody who's going to get in this boat with me and help me get to the other side. And that's how I found my doctor. And she's been that for me for years now. She always gets in the boat with me and is very dedicated.
Wow.
So yeah, I didn't just I had to seek her out, and it was worth it. So.
And it's amazing, and credit to you, and I think a real encouraging and empowering example to anybody that's listening to this, that we have to learn to trust ourselves, to know that we actually know ourselves better than anybody else does, and to advocate for our own health, whether it be mental, emotional, or physical, and to speak up and find somebody who will be that advocate with you. And so, I think what an incredible testimony that you've had to live the worst, but are now, I guess, on the other side with more of a roadmap than you had before.
Yeah. And absolutely.
I'm curious. Obviously, I know you very well and know your history, but you are someone with a really strong Christian faith.
Yeah.
Whether your faith perspective and heritage was helpful or a hindrance, or a bit of both on this journey.
Yeah. I think for me, so the time when the catalyst for me getting really sick was because it happened when I was working at our church, or what used to be my church. And that, and a lot of the things that made me unwell was because I was buying into a lot of cultural messages that were making me push my body really hard. And by the time I found out I had anxiety, I wasn't there anymore. But it was confronting for me, because I thought that I was doing the right thing and I thought I was in a safe place, and it hurt me. And that was probably the hardest thing about writing the story. Is I'm happy to talk about my own mental health stuff, but I hadn't talked publicly about what happened to me in that church role before, which I try to be very delicate about, because there's a lot to it. It's more than just something I can just sum up really quickly. But
of course,
I think for me, I tried to explain this once to a group of, I was at a small group, and I explained something, and the room went very quiet and stony. But I feel like I was handed serving Jesus and my relationship with God, who God is, together, and they grew intertwined. Okay. So the idea of working in church, doing something to make God happy, and this is who God is, grew up like braided together, which essentially meant that when I stopped doing things, I then had a God who wasn't happy with me.
Okay.
Because that's how, it was, I suppose, handed to me in a way, or how it had grown. So for me, it was a big, how do I find out who God is and what he really thinks of me, and abandon the church culture that hadn't been helpful for me at the same time. And that is very messy, kind of sticking something that was basically fused together and separating it and ripping it apart. So a lot of not throwing the baby out with the bathwater, but carefully spooning out all the water around the baby.
Wow.
Sort of thing. Yeah. So I feel like, I have probably a very different view of God now. And I have a very different view of church now. And I feel like, so for example, I would have felt at one point, if you asked me 10 years ago, I would have said that God wanted to get rid of my anxiety because it was bad, and he would have wanted to delete it because it's a problem that needs to get solved. Wow. Now I would say that my anxiety is a beautiful reflection of what fear does in our life, and I actually need to pay attention to it and love it. And God is in my anxiety, and he's not scared or ashamed of it, but he is flourishing in it. So I don't see, before it was like, I'm wrong and God is right, and he is slowly going to deal with me until I'm better. And now I would say that I'm amazing and God's happy with me just the way I am, and it's other people that have the problem. Essentially. So things like that.
Just in those last couple of sentences, I feel like anybody that's ever going to listen to this is just going, oh, thank you for articulating what I feel is maybe the details around the issue are a little bit different, but for so many people, this very fraught balancing act between what we think God expects or demands of us and our value, and learning to recognize how valuable we are, even if we're doing or producing nothing.
Yeah.
That anybody else is recognizing or affirming or acknowledging is such a profound thing. So thank you for articulating that. And thank you for being prepared to speak up and own that journey. Can you give us a couple of insights into some of the things that you did to get to that place?
I Oh, I did lots of things. So before I found out I had anxiety, I was already going to see a counselor, just because I just was like, I'm just not going well. And I'm a huge mental health. I see mental health is like going to the physio or going to the chiropractor. Like, if your back's sore, you just go book an appointment. Well, if you're not handling life very well, you just go book an appointment. So I found this amazing counselor called Elizabeth. And when I went to see her, I started telling her what I was experiencing, what my life was looking like. And she actually drew a picture where she said, so it was like a cross section. So you saw the top layer, which was like, you know, a little house and some trees and everything. And she's like, okay, that's your external life. That's what everyone's seeing right now. And then underneath the ground, she just drew this massive empty chasm. And she was like, you have nothing holding you up. Because I had no self-value, no self-worth, no self-esteem. Like, I was just hollow. And so she's like, that's why you're imploding. Because I went to her and I'm like, I can't function. And she's like, yeah, this is what's happening. So she said, we're going to work together to fill this inside. So I kind of had that map. And then after working with her for about a year, I found out that I had anxiety and I wanted to see a psychologist because I just wanted someone who had a bit more training. So I did. So going to see them is great, but it's like going to see a personal trainer once a month or once a week or a fortnight. Like, you have to do daily work.
Yeah.
And so I basically just tried lots of things. I tried different forms of journaling because I always express myself better in writing. I learned about mindfulness and tried different forms of that and meditation. Any sort of thing I could think of, I gave it a go. But I think for me, it was just becoming more and more focused on what's happening inside of me and tuning other people and other opinions out, which involved putting up a lot of boundaries. And I learned how to advocate for myself. I learned how to say no, or, you know, I need to think about that, or, you know, like start to put things in place. I left yet another job because it was just toxic. And again, I would have stayed there for a lot longer because I didn't think I was like, oh, whatever, that's just what I deserve. And then I became more like, no, this isn't helpful for me, so I'm leaving. Like, that sort of idea. It wasn't that easy. It was like really drawn out. But I think for me, I have a morning routine, which I wrote about in the book, which is really my anchor. Like, I was doing some morning stuff this morning and I haven't done anything for like a week, and I can already tell because I kind of get more wound up. So unfortunately, I have to do it every day.
So you found some disciplines, really, and I guess that word has a few connotations that we don't love.
Yeah, we call them practices now.
Sorry, you found some practices that are really anchoring for you. But it was trial and error to find the right ones.
Yes. And the other thing I learned is, even if you find something that works, it will work for me for 2 weeks and then I'll need to change it up. And I always saw that as failure. I was like, oh, I was so onto it and now I'm not working anymore. When now I see that as growth. Like,
wow, that's amazing.
Thank you. You know, when you get a car that's bogged in the ground and you put the bit of something inside and you drive over it and the next bit, like, I see it like that. So I basically, when something works for 2 weeks, I'm like, great, you know, let's tweak it so it just works for another 2 weeks. Where I used to get angry at myself and go, you know, why can't you get it together, basically.
I just want to say that phrase again because I feel like that's another just exhale moment, is that I stopped seeing it as failure and reminded myself it was growth.
Yeah.
It is really a life transforming mind shift. Because
my other biggest thing is I changed the way that I talk to myself. So I don't let myself bully myself anymore. So nasty Fiona's not allowed to say things to Fiona anymore. Like, so I'm very arresting about self-talk. Like, I'm like, if I feel myself saying, you're an idiot, I'm like, no, I'm not an idiot. I'm just having a bad day. Like, constantly advocating for yourself, and not letting, because I mean, when you say I'm being bullied, it's not often by other people. It's usually just you are just doing it on your own. And I found that it actually didn't take that long to stop, but that changed everything, because I stopped dragging myself down and I started being like, I'm really proud of myself today, you know? And that was a huge turning point for me.
Can you pinpoint in like when that switch happened, that you were able to recognize I need to be kind to myself? Like, how did you switch out of that sort of murky place where you believed had been told in lots of different ways that you were the problem, to be able to overcome that voice and actually say, no, I'm not the problem. I can trust myself. I need to advocate for myself, and I'm worthy of paying attention to. Was that a process as well?
It wasn't like a big moment. I'd say it would just be from Brene Brown, just being in the orbit of Brene Brown, who is like, you know, she's my hero. I feel like not only do I reference her constantly in conversation, which drives everyone nuts, I'm sure. I think every day I'm picking up like some part. I'm like, oh, what did she say again? And like, flicking through her book, but she says, talk to yourself like you would to somebody that you love. So I feel like it was stop shaming myself. So constantly, when you go on a war on shame, you realize that the shame is often coming from your self-shaming.
Yes.
Because someone has said it to you once, and then I realized that I was like, people have said horrible things to me, but they said it to me once, and then I've said it to myself 100 times.
Wow.
So they would say to me, you know, you're lazy, for example. But now I tell myself that I'm lazy. So I'm tormenting and traumatizing myself over and over again with trauma that happened in the past. Yeah, I didn't have like an actual moment, but I think just thinking through her work and applying it to my life, I realized that's what I was doing. And then I was like, well, that's something I need to stop.
So we're going to have to wrap up shortly, sadly. But before we do, I'm just wondering, of the people that are currently listening or will listen to this in the future, and perhaps are thinking to themselves, what the heck? I think actually I have got anxiety, or this is ringing lots of bells for me. Yeah. What words of encouragement would you give to that person? You know, next step, insights that have been helpful for you, maybe something that was unhelpful that we need to be aware of. Is there a couple of tips? Are there a couple of tips?
I think first of all, everybody has anxiety. Anxiety is part of being human. Anxiety disorder just means that your fear switch is basically turned on and it's not turning off. So, but whether it's depression or anxiety or, you know, whatever you're experiencing, it's actually a good thing. It's your body doing what it's meant to do. It's just like having a head cold or a migraine or something. It's gone a little bit too far and just needs to come back into alignment. So I think for me, you're not a bad person. Everybody has mental health. Like when you get sick, you don't think you're a bad person. So when you're having mental health sicknesses, it doesn't mean that you're a bad person either. It just means that you're human. And I think we're in constant denial of our own humanity. We can't admit that we're human, but we are. And then I think, you know, for me, seeing a counselor, counseling is a good place to start because you know, it's cheaper and, you know, easier, a bit more, you don't have to go see a doctor, you can just rock up to see a counsellor, whereas when you see a psychologist, you've got to kind of get into maybe a bit more of a formal health plan. But, you know, they're not scary. It's just, it's a conversation with somebody, and it's somebody, the great thing about going to see someone is that they don't know you, they don't know the people you're talking about, they don't know your family, they don't know your household. You can say whatever you need to say and you don't do damage to people. You can just, and it's all about you. Like, you're there to get better, and there's a person there helping you. And, you know, I would give everyone in Australia mandatory counselling, you know, because I just think it's so important. But to me, I think you have to do the work. You're not just going to rock up to one appointment and it's going to be better. Just like you won't go to a physio and you're just better. So they will guide you. So they will give you ideas and tips, and you'll go home and do those. But if you're not ready to do that, I would say journaling and asking. Rob Bell's wife, Kristen, does this. She's amazing 2-part episodes on his podcast where she talks about anxiety. And she talks about how she interviews her anxiety in journaling, and she asks the questions. And I find that very helpful. So you just write down, anxiety, what are you trying to teach me? And then you just get really still.
Wow.
And you just listen, and then you write down whatever you're feeling. No one's ever going to ever see it. But, you know, get curious. My psychologist used to say that to me, get curious about stuff. And I didn't know what she meant. But it really means stop being scared and start walking up to those feelings and looking at them from different angles and engaging with them instead of just running away and hiding. So, like, this morning, I obviously felt anxious about doing this because I've never done this before. And so instead of, what I want to do is I want to message Linda and go, I'm not doing it anymore. You know, but instead it's like, I'm scared because I haven't done this before. What's the worst that can happen? Why am I scared? And like interacting and playing with it, and then going, I just feel really uncomfortable because I'm out of my comfort zone, but that's okay. And kind of acknowledging that to yourself. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, that might really be helpful, but I just think feel like you'll never get out, but you will. But it will take work. Yeah. You're not going to just read a quote on Instagram and be better. Like, what? I know. It's a real shock to all of us.
I keep putting them out there, and I think that I'm solving all the world's problems, right?
Yeah, that's right. Well, you are helping, but
well, I think that's a beautiful place to finish, in that you've given some really practical, really honest, vulnerable tips. And I obviously am biased, but I just think you're an incredible human being, and your ability to articulate the things that you've been going through, and in a way that's really still hope-filled and empowering, is an absolute gift. And this is not a sell for the reason that people might think, but honestly, the things that Fiona's written in the latest volume of the She Is Project, she's got insight, she goes through her morning routine, and just speaks with such eloquence and vulnerability and empowerment. I think, you're a treasure, and I love you very much. And I know that anyone that listens to this at any point is going to get a tremendous amount out of it. And so thank you, Fiona.
That's okay.
I hope it wasn't as scary as you thought it would be.
It's okay. I'm ready to do it. I'm always ready to do something after I've done it the first time.
Okay, well, we'll look forward to part 2. But thanks everyone for joining, and feel free to spread the word and refer your friends to listen to some of these things. It'll be up on our IGTV page. Yay. Bye.
Bye.